Armstrong, 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 Armstrong,
You know, during my recent time in Cape Town, South Africa, I got a chance to meet the equivalent of what we would call CIA, what others would call Mossad, because Paul O'Sullivan, the author of Stop Me If You Can, not Catch Me If You Can, but Stop Me If You Can, is the foremost buster of criminal corruption in the country of South Africa, and he joins us to discuss his incredible journey. How did you get so engaged? I know you worked for MI6, that's public, you worked there. You've had your hands on a lot of intelligence operations, but how did you become the face of the person who had such disgust for corruption, whether it was South African Airways and other corporations in South Africa, even though they did everything they could to come after you, trying to get you locked up, to sully your reputation. When it was all said and done, integrity and no tolerance for corruption won. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Armstrong. And greetings from Johannesburg. It's just got dark now, so the sun went down. You shortly going to be starting your summer. We're shortly going to be starting our winter. And it was delightful to see you in Cape Town last weekend. My wife and I really enjoyed the Cape Town International Jazz Festival. Now, you asked me how I got involved in this. Well, if I turn the clock back a number of years, I had to turn the clock back about 25 years ago. I was appointed by the Minister of Transport to head up safety and security at all the airports in South Africa. The main focus, of course, was on security. And that was in the year 2001. Now, at the time, I had been in the border police, and I was running the border police unit at what was then called Johannesburg International Airport. It's now called OR Tambo International Airport. Now, when I took that position on, I was not aware of what a hornet's nest I was stepping into. And I ended up being in a position where, in order to crack the whip and improve security at the airport, I had to change a lot of the way things were being done. And ironically, I made all those changes. Most of them were implemented by September, October 2001. And along the way, I had been invited to the States to do some audits, what we call aviation security audits, because at the time I'm an expert. One of the many things that I specialize in is aviation security. So I've been invited to carry out security audit on JFK and Chicago O'Hare. And it was ironic because I started the security audit at JFK on the morning of 9/11. And in fact, I had breakfast in the World Trade Center with a gentleman by the name of Inspector Infante. And he was a police official from the New York, New Jersey Ports Authority Police. And we had a lovely breakfast at 6:30 in the morning at the World Trade Center. I think we're on the second or third floor. There's some restaurants there. Well, there were. Probably the last or one of the last people to have breakfast in that building, because we then jumped in his car. Their offices were in that building. We jumped in his car, and by the way, my baggage and all the rest of it was thankfully not my computer. I had my computer with me because that was part of my auditing kit. But the rest of my stuff was in the downtown Marriott in New York. And off we went in his car out to JFK, and we started the audit. And along the way with the audit, we were up in the control tower. And well, the rest, as they say, is history. This plane went in. And when the plane went in, before the plane went in, there was a phone call came through to the control tower. Now, I don't know if you know how air traffic control works, but the people involved in the area air traffic control, they tend to be not in a location where they can see with their eyes what's going on out there. But the control towers at airports, they have visibility of the land, the runways, the taxiways, and they also have visibility of the approaching aircraft into that airport. And they normally get the aircraft that are coming into land handed over to them when they're on their finals to land. And on this particular day, a phone call came through, and they said that an aircraft had gone missing. They couldn't see where it was. And could we see it? The last time it was seen, it looked like it was in downtown New York. And we looked out, and wow, the plane went straight into the World Trade Center. And then everybody else said, oh, you know, this was a shocking accident. But when I saw it happen, I've been a pilot for 40 years. I saw this plane go in, and I could see at the last minute how the plane had been steered. It hadn't accidentally gone into the building. It had been steered directly at the building. And I said, no, this is not an accident. These are terrorists. The next thing, the FBI were in the control tower, and they cleared the control tower. They wanted everybody out of there. So myself and Inspector Infanti, we left the control tower. He told me he had to go back to the offices, and I would have to wait at the airfield for him. So off he went back to the offices, and
Hold that. Wait. Let me take a break. This is so fascinating. We'll be back. I'm Armstrong Williams.
Armstrong, Armstrong. Armstrong,
Welcome back. Continue and then walk us through some of the most high-profile corruption cases that you've been involved in, Mr. O'Sullivan?
Okay, so I'll finish this little story off quickly. Inspector Infanti, he went back to his office. Now, he was supposed to be my protocol officer during the audit of JFK. And to cut a long story short, the second plane went in. And as the second plane went in, he was getting out of his car outside the World Trade Center at the second building, because the first building had been hit. And a piece of the aircraft or a piece of the building came down and killed him. And sadly, that was on a Tuesday morning. On a Thursday, the following week, I ended up going to his funeral. But first, I was trapped on Long Island. I couldn't get off because they closed the Brooklyn Bridge and they closed the tunnels. And the Triborough Bridge was closed. So I ended up paying a guy $50 on a boat to bring me across to the mainland. And then I got a taxi to Albany, where I rented a car from Avis and drove to Chicago O'Hare to do my next audit. But that wasn't possible because all the airspace in the States had been closed. So that, yeah, very sad story. I came back to New York in the rental car. My hotel had been blown to smithereens, so I had to buy clothing at a shop or a couple of shops. I bought shorts and stuff and underwear and everything, and I carried on with my work. And I was on the first plane out of New York back to South Africa, which was South African Airways flight from New York directly to Johannesburg, 16-hour flight. And when I got off that plane, having seen what I'd seen in the States, I made some further radical changes to the security operations of the airports in South Africa. And I was responsible for the 10 major airports in that country. And those changes, believe it or not, triggered all sorts of strange events, which led to me uncovering corruption on a massive scale, not just within the security environment, but within the police environment as well. And I ended up going after the chief of police, a chap by the name of Jackie Celebi, who coincidentally at the time was also the first African head of Interpol, president of Interpol in Lyon in France, because they rotate the presidency and then they have a vote at the annual meeting, and he somehow managed to get voted in as the first African head of Interpol. And we later found out during my investigations that he actually bribed some of the people that voted for him, if you want to call it that. He took them out for supper and night clubbing in Paris, and he used some of the money that he'd been paid in bribes here in South Africa. And I decided, okay, I'm going for you. My primary reason for going for him was that he was on the payroll of the security company that did the security of the 10 airports in South Africa. And I canceled their contract, and he wanted me not to cancel that contract. And the reason I canceled the contract was because of two things. A, the contract had been corruptly awarded, and B, the people were incompetent. And normally incompetence runs hand in hand with corruptly awarded contracts, because the people think, well, I don't have to work hard. I got the contract because I paid bribes, and therefore I don't really need to do too much to keep the contract going. So I went after them. I canceled their contract. They took me to court. They lost the court case. The judge said, no, he doesn't want to sit on a plane where there's a bomb or a gun or something like this. So he agreed that the contract should be canceled. And then I had the chief of police coming after me. So I decided to go after him, and I got him. He got 15 years in prison for corruption. And that was just the beginning. That was one of many scalps, if you want to call it that, I went after.
But you know what I find fascinating on a deeper level about this conversation, Paul, is that when you skate security measures and you're bought and paid for, and you feel that you don't have to adhere to certain standards, you compromise the safety of people flying out of that airport and infrastructure in and of itself. That's a dangerous situation.
Well, I want to give you an example of that. In 2004, now this is after my time in the airports in South Africa, but in 2004, two planes took off from Domodedovo Airport in Moscow, and both planes were headed to Siberia. And they both took off within 5 minutes of each other, and 20 to 30 minutes after takeoff, both planes were blown out of the sky. And they traced that back to what they called black widows in those days, Chechen terrorists who'd paid bribes to officials at Domodedovo Airport to get on those planes. Now, if they hadn't have paid those bribes, meanwhile they had the explosives wrapped around their body, and they blew themselves up on the plane and took down two planes. Now, obviously, if in the same way that security is compromised, the same applies to the police force. And I found that the upper hierarchy of the South African police force were equally corrupt. So I went after the lot of them. And I think up to now, I've taken down 2 chiefs of police and probably a further 12 generals in the police at very high rank. And I still have some on my radar screen that we're going after right now. So
hold your radar screen, because I really want to get back to also, this is a fascinating book, Stop Me If You Can, Paul O'Sullivan in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we'll be back.
Armstrong, Armstrong. Armstrong, Armstrong.
Share with us some insights from your work, Stop Me If You Can, that we all can learn, that it doesn't matter whether this was during the 2000s or whatever, corruption is very dangerous to the safety and security apparatus everywhere.
Yeah, no. So, Armstrong, it's important to understand why the book is called Stop Me If You Can. Because when I started exposing all this corruption within the police service, the National Prosecution Service, and certain state-owned companies, including South African Airways, Transnet, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, I exposed all this corruption. And I made it clear that I wasn't going away. I was going to take these people down come hell or high water. And I kept at it. And I attracted a lot of attention to myself by the chiefs of police who formed task teams of dirty cops to take me down. And I had, I think, in a 4-year period, 7 attempts on my life because they'd done deals with gangsters. If you can kill Paul O'Sullivan, we'll let you off this crime. So there were attempts to murder me, multiple attempts to murder me. They raided my offices, I don't know how many times. They kidnapped some of my staff. They came looking for me and they couldn't get me, so they kidnapped one of my staff, who was actually an attorney working for me. And they dragged me off a plane with my 2 small children. They assaulted me in front of my small children. And they arraigned me in court on no fewer than 6 different trials, with a total of 65 different fake charges. And I beat them on each and every one of those fake cases, because the problem with fake cases, they thought that would be a big distraction to me. They did not realize that my ability to fight back was stronger and better than their ability to take me down. So over a period of 3 years, I won each and every case. And when the last case was won, I turned round outside the court. I said, all of you now, it's your turn. Get yourselves ready. I'm coming for you. And I went after them and I locked them all up. They either on trial now or they got dismissed from their jobs and they're awaiting trial. Unfortunately, the criminal justice system in this country is not as fast as we'd like it to be. It's quite slow. I often liken it to life in Cape Town, where you have 3 speeds: slow, very slow, and stop. In Johannesburg, we have 3 speeds: fast, faster, and really fast. So, but the criminal justice system is more like life in Cape Town. So they tried every trick in the book to stop me, and they failed. And that's why I sent an email to the chief of police at that moment in time. And I told him, you need to resign. If you don't resign, I'm going to publish all these documents on my website, which I did. And at the end of my email, I said, stop me if you can. And they misinterpreted that as catch me if you can. And they decided to arrest me a week later and drag me off a plane on my way to London and drag me to court and say, no, I was busy trying to flee the country and they were going to arrest me. And they read out in court my email. And the judge said, well, hang on a minute. You just said that he said in the email, catch me if you can, but you've just read out, stop me if you can. Now, needless to say, the judge gave them a mauling and dismissed the charges against me. And what were the charges? The charges were that I had unlawfully entered South Africa using my Irish passport instead of my South African passport, because the law here says that if you've got a South African passport, you have to enter and leave the country using it.
What is amazing about you is that you relish this. You love the battlefield. You love fighting corruption. When we come back in our final thoughts, you've got to tell us what is the secret to your resiliency and staying on top and beating the bad guys. We'll be back. Don't go away. You are truly exceptional and fearless. What do you attribute this to?
You know, I remember taking some of my children once to see the movie, The Princess Diaries. And there was a little saying in there, I can't remember the exact words, but the diary, of course, it's a fictional movie, but the diary that was handed to this princess who didn't know she was a princess at that stage, there was a note written by her late father, who was the king of this fictitious country, and it said something like, you know, if you leave a life where you stay, where you avoid trouble, you haven't lived at all. And in order to survive in life, you have to take these things on head on. And if you don't, what are you going to do? You're not living, really. If you accept what's being dished out to you and you don't fight back, that's not living. That's accepting all the nonsense. And anybody that's interested, my book is still available on Amazon in the US. I think it's $19.95, although I gave instructions to them to reduce the price to $9.95. And then it's available in the US. Anybody can get it. It's a big book. It's 580 pages, but it's a good read. And
it's worth every
the readers
page,
will be riveted.
every paragraph. It's like watching a Netflix movie. It's the best, one of the best books I've read. Thank you, Paul O'Sullivan, for joining us. And thank you for fighting corruption. Fight it. We're out of here. I'm Armstrong. Thank you. Yes.
Good luck, Armstrong.
Same
God
to you.
bless.
Yes, God bless.